We're not starting with the good man is hard to find. We're finishing barn burning. And I believe we left on 412, 413. Fort 13 is actually where we left off. So, to recount what has happened, Abner Stopes and his youngest son, Sardi, made their way to Major Despain's house. Major Despain is the landowner who has the property that Abner is going to sharecrop for 8 months or so. When he got there, he went inside the house, stepped on the floor, stepped on a beautiful carpet that was from France, smeared horse dung on it, left, damaged the rug. Major Despain brings the rug back to him, says, "You damaged my wife's rug, fix it and bring it back." He scrubs it with lye soap and a stone, burns essentially a mark in it, totally ruins it, takes it back. We pick up on 413 and we find out there's a new trial. The story began with a trial, so now we have a second one. And at the very bottom of 412, we're told what Sardi is thinking. The trial's actually begun a little bit earlier, okay, on 412. It begins on 413. In Sardi's thinking, maybe this is the end of it. Maybe even that 20 bushels that seems hard to have to pay for just a rug will be a cheap price for him to stop forever and always from being what he used to be. Thinking, dreaming now. So that his brother had to speak sharply to him to mind the mule. Maybe he won't even collect the 20 bushels. Maybe it will all add up and balance and vanish. Corn, rug, fire, the terror and grief, the being pulled two ways, like between two teams of horses. Okay? What's he talking about, the 20 bushels of corn? What's the deal with the 20 bushels of corn? Where does that come in?
The fault or something of damaging the road.
Major Despain says, because you've damaged the rug, you've ruined it, it's not worth anything, I'm going to charge you 20 bushels of corn against the total amount he already has to raise. So he's got to raise more, essentially. Okay? That's going to come out of, remember when I had up here the plot of land, and he might have like 20 acres? That's going to come out of his. So that's going to hurt his family. Okay? So Sardi has these thoughts. And notice, the being pulled between two ways. What are the two ways?
Being loyal to the family or telling the actual truth or justice.
Bingo. Being loyal to his family or telling the truth, justice. What's another word for that kind of stuff? Be a good moral person. Stick with your family or do what's right. Okay? And notice the description is mine. It's like being pulled between two teams of horses. Not a single horse, but like two minimum on each side. Drawn and quartered, that's what that phrase refers to. Legs tied to the end of one team of horses, arms tied to the end of another team of horses. You slap those horses on the flanks, and you're pulled apart. Not a pleasant way to die. Then it's Saturday. Okay, they go up to the town. There's a new trial. What's the trial for? Who is the plaintiff in the trial, and who is the defendant? Who brought this case to the judge? Louder? Abner did. He's essentially suing his employer. For what? He's charging me too much for having destroyed his rug. Okay? This is a, I'm going to use gutsy. This is a gutsy move on his part. There's another term you could use, not quite appropriate. All right? So, the justice says, Bert, notice we're missing something. We haven't heard all of the conversation. Bert, do I understand this rug was burned too? Meaning like lit on fire? Abner, does anybody here claim it was? Tells the son again, go back to the wagon. And you claim 20 bushels of corn too high for the damage you did to the rug. Abner, look at his defense. He brought me the rug. Said he wanted the tracks washed out of it. I washed the tracks out of it and took the rug back. Literally speaking, is Abner telling the truth? Yes, he is. It's just, what else happened to the rug when he washed the tracks out of it? He removed the fabric from it. It's like taking a, pair of shears and he just cut all those fibers off so that stain was gone. But now the rug isn't what it was before he stepped on it. Okay? And that's why the judge says, but you didn't carry the rug back to him in the same condition it was in before you made the tracks on it. His father didn't answer. Why? Because he can't answer that question. If he says, you're right, Your Honor, case closed. He loses. Okay? I'm going to find against you because he can't answer. I'm going to find you were responsible for the injury to Major Despain's rug, and I'm going to hold you liable for it. Now that sounds like what? Boom! Full weight of justice coming down on him. But, and what does the justice of the peace show or give, let me put it that way, to Abner Snopes? He could do what? He could, proverbially throw the book at him. Find totally against him. Nope, you got to pay the 20 bushels and I'm going to, as some judges do, and I'm going to add on court costs. Rental of this, building, so to speak, and all those kinds of things. But, he says, 20 bushels of corn seemed a little high for a man in your circumstances. Meaning? Yeah, for someone who's dirt poor. Major Despain claims it costs $100. October corn will be worth 50 cents. That's 50 cents a bushel. I figure if Major Despain can stand a $95 loss on something he paid cash for, you can stand a $5 loss you haven't earned yet. So, you're going to pay Major Despain 10 bushels of corn. He's just cut in half the amount the Major wanted from Abner. What's he demonstrating to Abner? He has him totally in his power, in his authority, to fight him completely. But he does what? He shows him mercy. This is an entirely merciful act, all right? So it's 10 bushels of corn over and above your contract with them. His contract is for a certain amount of bushels of corn. Now he has to add 10 to that. Court adjourned. That's it. Okay? I'm going to assume this about you. If you or I were in Abner's position, what would you, and you weren't Abner, you were you, and the judge did this, what would you think upon leaving court? Whew. Dodge that bullet, right? not Abner. Why? Back to a passage I forgot to discuss the other day. It's a pretty important passage. Page 408. So just for a moment, the first paragraph, the last sentence. It's a long sentence. It's Faulkner. There was something about his wolf-like independence. This is the boy thinking about his father, right? So there was something about his, Abner's, wolf-like independence and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral, which impressed strangers as if they got from his latent, ravening ferocity not so much a sense of dependability as a feeling that his ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own actions would be of advantage to all whose interest lay with his. Big, long, convoluted, complex sentence. So you have to unpack it. Start at the beginning. Something about his wolf-like independence. Are wolves independent creatures? No. What do? They run in packs. When there's a terrorist incident involving usually one person, or rephrase that, when there's a terrorist incident involving one person, the media will describe it as what? A lone wolf attack. In other words, this isn't someone who's part of a cell or part of a pack. Okay? What is a lone wolf? If you have a pack over here and you have a single wolf over here, why is this wolf over here and not part of the pack? Because the pack has kicked the wolf out. Why? See, this is why the lone wolf idea is important. Because that wolf is dangerous to the pack. Extrapolate to human society. What do we call people who continually kind of break the law? They are outlaw. Why? They don't follow the law, even though that's not originally what outlaw means. Originally, outlaw means you are beyond the protection of the law, not beyond the confines. That means if you are an old meaning of the word, if you were an outlaw, anybody could do anything they wanted to you. The law wasn't going to protect you. You kill somebody's wife in this kind of mentality of society, guess what? You're not protected by the law. You don't have a right to a lawyer. Because that husband has the right, in this kind of mentality, to go after you no matter what. Okay? So, back here. His wolf-like independence. What is that telling us about Abner? He's dangerous to society. If a wolf is independent and is kicked out of its pack, it's because it's dangerous to the pack. If Abner has wolf-like independence, what's he saying to the rest of society? The middle finger. F you. I'm the one who's right. You're the ones who are wrong. Or, as Alfred says in Batman, some men just want to see the world burn. He's what? Antisocial? That's mild. I'm antisocial. He's a psychotic. Okay? He's a sociopath. So, that's the first part. His wolf-like independence and even courage. Notice, when the advantage was at least neutral. In other words, when there isn't an advantage. That is, if everything is more or less equal, someone looking at Abner would say, oh, this guy's independence and his courage, wow, that's something. It impresses strangers. Notice, when the balances are are equal. Not when it's leaning more towards his side. As if they, strangers, got from his latent, ravening ferocity Well, we all know what ferocity is. If you are ferocious, kind of means you can't be controlled. You can't be contained. A ferocious lion, a ferocious dog, is not a dog you want around children. It's not a lion you want running through your village. Okay? So that's the ferocity part. Ravening, it can't be satisfied. It can't be sated. S-A-T-E-D. Nothing will fill the hunger. Not literal hunger, but the desire for whatever's out there. So that's ravening. Latent. What is something if it's latent? Just under the surface. So this ravening ferocity, what's another phrase we could use to describe Abner? Have you known people where you say something to them and they go nuclear on you? They just blow up? It might be all hell's breaking loose in their family or in their home or whatever their situation is, and the slightest little trigger sets them off. They, to use another metaphor, hasn't happened in a while, thank God, they go postal. Okay? Just beneath the surface. He's a short fuse. Touch him. Okay? So that's latent ravening ferocity. As if they got from his latent ravening ferocity not so much a sense of dependability. That is, that they can always count on Abner. You poke him just right, and he's going to fire. All right? Not that. As much as a feeling that his ferocious conviction, there's that word again, ferocious. His ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own action. Which action? I think he's implying, Faulkner's implying, whatever Abner does, I'm right. And if I'm right, then what does that mean about everybody else? They're wrong. He has this kind of Superman, I don't mean the guy in tights. I mean, to use the German, the Übermensch or the Overman complex. This is an ideology that Hitler latched onto, man, just absolutely loved. Because what does it mean? It actually goes back. It's first expressed in literature in a Russian writer, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, where you have a guy who kills an old woman, and he does it just because he, one, wants to see if he can, and two, wants to see if he can get away with it. For the simple reason that he thinks, because I'm so bright, I'm not bound by the laws that other people are bound to. That's this ideology. Your puny little laws don't touch me. Why? Because I'm smarter than everybody else. Okay? Ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own actions would be advantage to all whose interest lay with his. So people, strangers, would look at him and go, if he's going in the same direction we're going, that'll be an advantage to us. Why? Because this guy's a cannon, man. So what if something happens and their directions do this? Run away, because he's crazy. It's okay to have the crazy guy on your side. But when the crazy guy's on the other side, who do you want, whose side do you want the Hulk on? Yours or somebody else's? You want him on yours. That's the idea here. Okay? So now go back. So, Abner's just been shown mercy. Does he thank the justice of the peace? Why not? Because he's still convinced in the rightness of his actions. I cleaned the damn rug. The stain isn't there. You didn't tell me this would be his real defense if he were forced to utter it. You didn't tell me to return it in the same condition it was when I first stepped on it. If you had told me to do that, maybe, probably not, I would have done it. He knew what Despain wanted. So, they go back home. Well, to the hovel. And they eat supper. And we're told, paragraph 85, bottom of 414, they ate supper by lamplight then, sitting on the doorstep. The boy watched the night fully accomplish. So they eat supper, and then the boy goes out and sits on the front step, and he watches night descend. You know, the sun set. Listening to the whippoorwills and the frogs when he hears his mother's voice. Notice that image, first of all, before he hears his mother's voice. What's it kind of describe? I don't mean literally, what does it describe? What does it evoke? What kind of mood should it put one in? He's sitting on the front step. He watches the sunset. He hears what? He hears the birds singing. He hears the frogs start croaking. This is peaceful. It's calming. It's, I lived through another day in his short 10 years. Abner, no! No! Oh, God, Abner! He hears his mother cry. And what, reading into it, what goes into the boy's mind? What two words might he initially think? And yeah, you can go ahead and swear. Oh, shit. Not again. He knows exactly what is happening. And he rose, whirled, and saw the altered light through the door where a candle stub now burned and a bottleneck on the table, and his father, still in the hat and coat, at once formal and burlesque, as though dressed carefully for some shabby and ceremonial violence, emptying the reservoir of the lamp back into the 5-gallon kerosene can from which it had been filled. So, he had a 5-gallon kerosene can. We're not told that it's full, but he had poured a little bit of kerosene into the lamp. But now, he's taking the kerosene back out of the lamp and putting it back in the 5-gallon jug. Why? We don't need no light in this house right now. I need the kerosene for something else. His father sees him, Sardi, standing in the door. Go to the barn, get that can of oil we were oiling the wagon with. And the boy doesn't move. He couldn't speak. Well, then he could speak. So he doesn't move, and then he finds words. What are you? Go get that oil. Go. He has to tell him 3 times. Why? The old fierce pull of blood, and as if being torn between 2 teams of horses. Part of the boy says, no. And then he's moving, running. And the boy thinks, as he makes his way to the barn, notice the italics, I could run on and never look back. Never need to see his face again. Only I can't. There's the tension. I could leave forever, but I can't. Why? Because that chain of blood is pulling him back. He can't abandon his family. And he has the can in his hand now. And he brings it to his father. Ain't you going to even send a nigger? Aren't you even going to warn them? Father didn't strike him. Hand came even faster than the blow had. The same hand which had set the can on the table with almost excruciating care, flashing from the can toward him, too quick for him to follow it, gripping him by the back of his shirt, okay, and holding him. Empty the can of the big one and go on. I'll catch up with you. He's not talking to Sardi. He's talking to the older, nameless brother. Notice, none of the other siblings are named. It's just bovine sisters and brother. Okay? He's holding Sardi by the back of his shirt. Brother says, better tie him up to the bedpost. Do like I told you. Hold him, the father says. He holds Sardi out to his wife. Hold him. Their aunt starts to move towards him. Not you. Lenny, that's the wife, take hold of him. Why his wife? Why not? We don't know if the aunt is the wife's sister or Ebner's sister. I always assume it's the wife's sister. I could be wrong. Maybe it is told later on. I want to see you do it. Why? What's he kind of forcing her to do? Yeah, what she doesn't want to do, but it's almost like making her an accomplice. Why is he saying hold him? What's he think Sardi's going to do? He's going to run up and tell him. I mean, if you're not going to send a warning, the implication is Sardi's going to do it. You hold him better, and if he gets loose, don't you know what he's going to do? He'll go up yonder. Maybe I had better time. She goes, no, I'll hold him. See you do then. And then his father's gone. And the boy begins to struggle. Let me go. I don't want to have to hit you. The aunt, let him go. If he don't go before God, I'm going to. So she's saying, Lenny, you got a choice. You can let your son do it, or I'm going to do it. But one way or another, they're going to be warned. Don't you see? I can't. Sardi, no, help me, Lizzie. Somebody else has a name finally. So we have Abner Snopes, his wife Lenny Snopes, Sardi Snopes, the youngest of the children, and his aunt Lizzie. None of the other people are named, okay? Why does his mother say I can't? Could be she's scared of Abner. Who wouldn't be? I think it's pretty safe to assume probably a little abusive in his relationship with her. Why else? She's married to him. Is this the old fierce pull of blood? Better not be. They better not be blood related. I mean, it is the Deep South, Mississippi in the 1890s. Could be. That's not it. It's the marriage bond, so to speak. Then he's free. And he runs. Okay? He gets to the house before his father and brother, bangs on the door. Despain. Where's? He sees the white man emerging from a white door down the hall. Barn. That's all he says. Barn. It's like, okay. What? Barn? Notice, question mark. So his pronunciation, intonation of it changes. Despain says, barn? Yes, barn. Give me a verb, kid. Catch him, the white man shouted. But it was too late. The Negro grasped his shirt, but the entire sleeve, rotten with washing, carried away. Remember we were told about his clothes? His pants that are patched and torn, or torn and patched and too small for him? Well, his shirt, he grabs the sleeve and it just comes off. And he runs. Behind him he hears the white man Major Despain. My horse, fetch my horse. He keeps running. He hears the horse galloping up behind him. Okay? The horse goes past him. Doesn't stop. Despain doesn't stop and grab the kid. Explain what you're here for. He's kind of put two and two together. The boy keeps running, and he hears, towards the end of that paragraph, pausing now without knowing he had ceased to run. Knowing it was too late, yet still running even after he heard the shot. And an instant later, 2 shots. So, 3 shots total. And he cries, Pep, Pep. Running again before he knew he had begun to run, stumbling, tripping over something, scrabbling up again without ceasing to run, looking backward over his shoulder at the glare as he got up, running on among the invisible trees, panting, sobbing, Father, Father, where has he obviously not run to? Back to their home. Back to where his mother and sisters and aunt are. Why? Because he keeps running and running and running. Notice, he can see the glare. Why glare? Why not flames? Louder? Keep going. You're right. How far away is he? He's run a long distance. He can no longer make out individual flames. Now all he sees is that orange glow. He's run miles by this point. Okay? At midnight, he's sitting on the crest of a hill. When did all this begin? Right at sunset. This is May. So, Mississippi, 7 o'clock or so? 7:30 maybe? And now it's midnight. He didn't know it was midnight. He didn't know how far he'd come. But there's no glare behind him anymore. He's run far. Notice, he's on the crest of a hill. He's on high ground. What happens to your vision when you're on high ground? You can see farther. Go to Lookout Mountain, where you can go to where you can go to Lookout Point and see 7 states. You know, they got a little diagram, and you can see all 7 states if it's a clear day. Go to Dover, England on a clear day. You can look across the English Channel and see the lights of Normandy, the coast of France, 30 miles away. Okay? He's on the top of a hill. He can no longer see the glare. He's run a long way. More than just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 miles. Probably more like 10 or 15. No glare behind him. His back toward what he'd called home for 4 days. Face toward the dark woods. And he thinks of his father, hugging himself into the remainder of his thin, rotten shirt, the grief and despair, now no longer terror and fear, but just grief and despair. Why no longer terror and fear? Daddy ain't gonna burn no more barns. Why? His father and, it's kind of implied, his brother, they're both dead. That fear from his father, instilled by his father, that Daddy can't hurt me no more. No more being slapped upside the head. But there's still grief and despair. Talk to any woman who's been abused, and almost all of them will still say what about the abuser? I still love him. It's inexplicable. What does inexplicable mean? Cannot be explained. Okay? Father, my father. He was brave. He was. He was in the war. He was in Colonel Sartor's cavalry. That is, he fought in the cavalry for Colonel Sartoris. And yet the narrator told us early on in the story, what about Abner? He didn't fight for either side. He was a horse thief. Lowest of the low, okay, in this time period. Not knowing that his father had gone to that war, a private in the fine old European sense, wearing no uniform, meaning showing no allegiance to either side, admitting the authority of and giving fidelity to no man or army or flag. No loyalty to anyone but himself. Going to war as Malbrook himself did for booty, that is, for what I can get out of it. It meant nothing less. It meant nothing and less than nothing to him if it were enemy booty or his own. It doesn't matter where he stole from. The slow constellations wheel on, and we get this long, relatively long paragraph that all describes what? The sun comes up in the morning, he hears the whippoorwills, and he goes on walking. Why? What does this represent for Sardi? It both represents and is. When I say represent, kind of symbolically means. And literally at the same time is. See, one thing about a symbol is the thing that it is. But it can also stand for something else. Okay? What is this for him? It's his new day. It's his new beginning. This is the beginning of the first day of his life. Symbolically. Why? Family's gone. That old fierce pull of blood, he severed it. Yes, there's still grief. There's still despair. But it's no longer pulling him back. It's no longer controlling him. When he woke up, it was almost like a weight had been lifted. Okay? And we're told. No, we'll stop there. Okay, so we'll stop there. You got a bunch of questions you can read to help you decide what you think barn burning is about. I want to turn to, we won't get it all done today. Flannery O'Connor, good man is hard to find. Read the biographical background about her. She died very young. She was 25 to 64, 39 years old. Died of lupus. Okay. Had a fairly short writing career. Pages 361 and following is where a good man is hard to find. Guggenheim Fellowship, she was praised when some of her stories were published in the 50s, as a new voice, et cetera, et cetera. O'Connor's reputation really got big in the later 60s and 70s, long after she had died. Okay? This story's written in 1953, so she was 25, 28 then. It's about a family leaving Atlanta, Georgia, to go on a vacation. A good man is hard to find. Remember I said the other day, I think I said it in here, every title gives you a destination. Every title is like a roadmap. Tells you where you're going, essentially. Okay? So what does this title mean? A good man is hard to find. We're going to hear the phrase, I think twice, within the course of the story. Okay? It's going to be said by Red Sammy Butts to the grandmother. She's going to go, "Yes'm." And they're kind of going to be talking almost about two different things. I think O'Connor has, in the back of her mind, if not in the front of her mind, this passage from the New Testament. Okay? One thing about, let me add about O'Connor. O'Connor's Catholic. She's Catholic, born and raised in the deep South. Born in 1925. Okay? Not a lot of Catholics in Milledgeville, Georgia in 1925. I mean, she is other in that sense. She's not, your good old Baptist, your good old Methodist, your good old Church of Christ kind of Southern Protestant. She sits outside. She's a ring-kissing papist, which is what most non-Catholics would have called her, all right? And she takes it seriously. She takes her faith very seriously. If you read one of the things I have linked in the syllabus, she says she writes the way she does because she's Catholic, not in spite of being Catholic. So what does that mean, she writes the way she does? She's a writer of the genre called Southern fiction, as is Faulkner. Okay? What does that mean? Fiction set in the South. Yes, but it's more than that. It's dominated by the image of the grotesque. Not grotesque like, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the guy with the big hunch on his back, or the Elephant Man, the guy who's got to be wound up with bandages because he freaks people out when they see him. Not that kind of grotesque. We're talking about grotesqueness of soul, grotesqueness of character. Who or what is grotesque in Barn Burning? Abner, pretty essentially, right? It's not the justice of the peace in either of those two courts. Those guys are nice. It's not Mr. Harris. It's not Sardi. Sardi does what's right. It's Abner. How do you know? Because of latent ravening ferocity and the rightness of his own decisions and such. Okay? You got other kinds of grotesque. In some of her stories, you got, a one-legged guy and somebody steals his leg. And there's stuff that happens because of that. So, in this story, the grotesque is going to be the character, the misfit. His name tells you everything. He doesn't fit. He doesn't belong. Okay? A good man is hard to find. The book of Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 19, verse 16. A guy comes running up to Jesus and says, "Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?" It's a King James version, so it's a little stilted. Jesus, why do you call me good? There is none good but one, that's God. Okay? So, good master, why are you calling me good? Only God is good. Because the Psalm says, there is no one who is good. All right? So Jesus, recapitulates that. And he says, but if you want eternal life, keep the 2 commandments. And the guy says, which? Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not keep the commandments. Thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. Honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Notice, that's not all the 10 commandments. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, it's not in the 10 commandments. The young man, I've done all these. I haven't committed adultery, I haven't killed anybody, I've honored my father and mother, I've loved God, and I treat people well. What else? You mean I'm in? I'm saved, Oh, you want to be perfect? Okay, if you want to be perfect, go and sell that thou hast. That is, go sell everything you have. Give what you receive from selling everything to the poor. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. and come and follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. In other words, damn, I could have done everything else, but sell everything I have, then I'll be poor. And that's why Jesus says, then come and follow me. Because what possessions does Jesus have? None. Okay? Good master. A good man is hard to find. And by the way, I think when Jesus says, why do you call me good? There is none good but God. I think there's a bit of a pun going on there. I think Jesus is going, good job. You recognized me. Because according to traditional Christian theology, Jesus is God. So, the grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. That's preface to this. She wanted to visit some of her connections in East Tennessee, family, friends. And she was seizing at every chance to change Bailey's mind. Bailey's the son she lived with. Her only boy. Is that telling us anything? He's sitting on the edge of his chair at the table, bent over the orange sports section of the journal. That's the Atlanta Constitution and Journal. And she goes, she's holding the newspaper. She goes, look here, Bailey. Standing with one hand on her thin hip and the other one rattling the paper in his face. He's just trying to eat breakfast and read the sports. Here this fellow calls himself the Misfit, is loose from the federal pen, headed towards Florida. You read here what it says he did to these people. Just you read it. I wouldn't take my children in any direction with a criminal like that loose in it. Couldn't answer to my conscience if I did. And what O'Connor has just done is given us a wonderful example of dramatic irony. Why? Because in the course of the story, because of her actions, they're going to go exactly in the direction that the misfit is. Because of her actions, they're going to meet the misfit. Because of her words, the misfit is going to have to kill them. It's all because of her. All right? To give away a bunch. Notice Bailey doesn't look up. Why not? We're not told why not. He just doesn't. You have to interpret it. Is this the only time this kind of incident has happened? Where he's been sitting there trying to read the newspaper and his mom's... No, this happens probably all the time. So he has learned to tune her out. So she goes and speaks to the children's mother, who's never named. A young woman in slacks whose face was so broad and innocent, was as broad and innocent as a cabbage. Ladies, do you want to be described as having a face broad and innocent as a cabbage? Okay, maybe the innocent part, but like a cabbage? Really? Round and kind of nondescript and plain. And then she gets described that way again. Okay? She's sitting on the sofa feeding the baby. The old lady goes on. Children have been to Florida before. Y'all ought to take them somewhere else for a change so they would see different parts of the world be broad. They never been to East Tennessee. Like, woohoo! Going to Dollywood is going to make you cultured and world travelers, you know. Long before Dollywood, obviously. That's her point. They've been to Florida. Let them see something. Children's mother, notice, didn't seem to hear. She's also learned to tune out mother-in-law. But the 8-year-old boy, John Wesley, stocky child with glasses, stocky child. What's that telling us? That's a euphemism, folks. The kid's fat. Said, if you don't want to go to Florida, why don't you stay at home? What's that tell us about John Wesley? Little brat. How many of you have grandmothers that would let you, when you were 8 years old, speak that way? Yeah, both of mine. One of them who's kind of a largest woman, the other one this little frail. Nope, I wouldn't be sitting for a week. And then be a few more weeks once my dad got done. He and the little girl, June Star, were reading the funny pages. June Star says she wouldn't be at home. She wouldn't stay at home and be queen for a day. So describe these children. As you said, brats, spoiled, undisciplined. Okay? Grandma, yes, what would you do if you met this fellow, this misfit? John Wesley, I'd smack his face. Okay. June Star goes on and says something else. So the next morning, the grandmother is the first one in the car. She doesn't want to go to Florida, and yet she's the first one in the car. Ready to go. Has a big black valise, that's a suitcase, packed and everything. She has underneath the suitcase a basket with her cat. Why? She doesn't want to leave the cat at home because she's afraid the cat will brush up against the knob on the gas stove, turn the gas on, and asphyxiate. Her son Bailey didn't like to arrive at a motel with a cat. He doesn't like the cat. She sits in the middle. The kids get in. The mother and father and baby get in. So how many people are there on this trip? Dad driving, mom in the front seat next to him, holding the baby, no car seats, no seat belts in 1953. Okay? At all. Car seats don't come around until the late 1970s. Seat belts come in the late 1950s. Okay? And in the back, so you have three in the front, and then John Wesley, June Star, an old lady / grandma in the middle. All right? 6 people. So, we're told how she's dressed and why she's dressed that way. She wants people to know if there's an accident, for them to know that she's a lady. Okay? She said she thought it was going to be a good day for driving, neither too hot nor too cold. She cautioned Bailey speed limit's 55. Bailey knows that. What else is this before? When they left Atlanta, what road did they get on to go to Florida? Or what road would you get on if you were in Atlanta to go to Florida? Anybody know? I-75. Takes you straight down Atlanta, go through Macon, get Lake City, Florida, and then there you pick up I-4. It goes all the way down to Orlando, okay? And then you get on the Florida Turnpike if you're going down to Miami, or you get on I-4 if you're going, I lived in Florida for 2 years, if you're going over to, Tampa, St. Pete, or Daytona, okay? There is no I-75 in 1953. There are no interstate highways like Interstate 40, or I-24, or Interstate 95, or Interstate 80, or I-10. None of those exist yet because President Eisenhower isn't yet President Eisenhower. He's still General Eisenhower. He runs for president, gets elected in 1954, and starts the interstate highway system. He does that for one reason, because of his experience in World War II in Europe. It wasn't easy to move material, war material, from point A to point B. And he was like, we need to have the national system of roads so that if something happens, we can move tanks and everything else quickly. That's why we have Interstate 40 and all the interstates, okay? So, they start driving. We get what the odometer reads at the beginning of the journey, and the little children are talking with the grandmother, and the boy says, let's get through Georgia fast so we don't have to look at it much. In other words, he hates his own state. Okay? The grandmother says something about, that's not a good way to talk about your state. John Wesley, when she refers to Tennessee, Tennessee's just a hillbilly dumping ground. Georgians thinking of Tennesseans, and Tennesseans think of Georgians, nothing but a bunch of redneck hicks. Okay, we'll stop there because we're out of time. So we'll finish picking up around paragraph 15 on page 363. We'll finish this on Monday. I'm going to put up a quiz today. I didn't do it the other day. I'm going to put up a quiz today that's going to be about, if I remember correctly, minister's black veil and barn burning and some of the fiction terms again. Okay? I'll finish grading the extra credit one also this afternoon. Have a good weekend.